when you're trying to be perfect, and perfect is not a state, right? It's a mirage. Even when you get there, you'll be like, oh, I could have done more.
Totally.
Of course. Yeah.
It's not like you get there and you're like, I was perfect.
I've arrived. Time to die.
Dear Shandy. Welcome back to Dear Shandy, listeners. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing okay. Doing okay. How are you?
I'm good. I'm both really excited and a little nervous for today.
Close to home.
Yes. Today's topic is extremely close to home, and I've been sort of working my way up to it. I'm worried I may cry today, but we'll try. I'll try not to. Okay, so we are joined today by a lovely, lovely guest who is extremely qualified to take on the topic of perfectionism. So she is the CEO and founder of the Goodbye Perfect Project, a collection of science-backed programs designed to help women achieve their true potential, which sounds lovely and meaningful and fulfilling and all the things. She is the host of the Life is a Highway podcast, a researcher specializing in women's confidence, and she holds master's degrees in coaching psychology and in positive psychology, which is the science of human flourishing and well-being. Isn't that so nice?
It is.
It sounds like she has a nice life. She's been featured in Forbes, Happify, Thrive Global, and the Huffington Post with over 1 million readers. And her new book, Goodbye Perfect, How to Stop Pleasing, Proving, and Pushing for Others and Live for Yourself, comes out next week on April 11th. Homaira Kabir, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sharleen. Thank you, Andy. This is an honor to be here. Seriously.
I have to tell you, we're just so excited this worked out because you are in Oman, correct?
Yes.
I mean, this is definitely the most international we've gone. So.
Yeah, this is very close to the opposite end of the earth.
Yes. Isn't technology amazing?
It's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
A blessing amazing. A blessing and a curse. Okay, so before we get going, Homaira, as you know, we rescheduled this call. We were originally supposed to do this a week ago. And then with a couple days notice, I was like, no, we have to reschedule. We have to do a week later. And the honest to God truth is because I had not completely finished your book from cover to cover, and I knew I wouldn't have time to. And the perfectionist in me could not allow, I felt like too much of a fraud having you on and asking you about your book if I had not read every single word and really digested it. And so, as you can imagine, this topic is close to home today. The idea of just sort of always needing to prove how ready and qualified and everything you are. So I also know that our listeners, the Shandys, really identify with this a lot. They submitted a lot of questions for you today. So we're really excited to have you on.
Oh, awesome. But I mean, in this case, I don't know whether I should say, I wish you weren't such a perfectionist, because I love the fact that you read it cover to cover. There could be nothing more meaningful for me. So that is amazing.
Yeah, well, it's always like a sort of song and dance when we have an author on. I'm like, well, I have to read the whole book. But then, as the days get closer, I'm like, well, I've read this much and there's this many days left. And I start to sort of spiral. So we're going to start at the very beginning here. When I read your book, I'm not sure I would have expected confidence, and namely two types of confidence, fragile confidence and optimal confidence, to really be at the core of what I deemed to be, I always thought my perfectionism was just this quirk, this thing that kind of worked for me and against me. Can you explain fragile confidence and optimal confidence before we get going?
Yes. And Sharleen, it's funny because when my background, my degree was in positive psychology. So when I started my research, my postgrad research, what I was really researching was, what does it take for women to flourish? So my topic was flourishing, but it so happened that I discovered in the research that it was really fragile confidence that got in the way of our flourishing. And so that is how it all turned toward confidence and understanding that there are these two types of high confidence. Fragile confidence also looks like high confidence, but one of them is stable and the other is unstable. One of them is independent of external factors. The other is dependent on external factors. So, somebody says something nice about you, or you have, success, or you get approval and all of that. So it is dependent on all those things. And so it is constantly in flux, as you can imagine. Now, the thing with fragile confidence is when you have fragile confidence, you get hooked onto perfectionistic behaviors. And in the book, I write that there are many types of masks, right? So it's not only crossing the T's and dotting the I's, it's also being a pleaser, trying to prove yourself, trying to have a perfect life, trying to prove that you know more than the other does. All of those things are different ways that perfectionism can show up. But in fragile confidence, perfectionism is one of the key features of it. So the way we let go of perfectionism is moving from fragile confidence to optimal confidence. And that is what frees us to flourish. So really, the book is about flourishing. The book is about how do we live our optimal lives? How do we grow into the person that we want to be? And letting go of perfectionism just happens on the way to that. So when that happened, I actually was very excited because I felt this brings a different perspective because, there are so many hacks that we always try to let go of perfectionism, pleasing. We all know when they're holding us back. Most of us know that our perfectionistic tendencies are holding us back. We try a few things, some work, some don't work. And it's amazing to have all these hacks and all of that. But unless we also do the inner work of building that self-worth and all of that, none of them can last because every time now you're facing a challenging situation or something happens or something comes up, it is only natural to revert to your old behaviors because we're wired to want safety. So we just go back to what felt safe, and what we've been doing for decades always feels safe.
And it's possible to be optimally confident in some facets of our life and more fragilely confident in others? Or does it tend to be all or nothing?
Oh, definitely. So now again, if you want me to dig deep into that, it happens largely because of the early experiences we have and the messages we receive about what is important in our life and stuff like that. So whatever messages we receive about the areas of our lives that are important, then our confidence kind of becomes hooked onto that. Like that is the area where we want to get praise, where we want to do well, we need approval. And so, yes, maybe you could be very securely attached in your relationship, but not securely attached as far as work goes. You may not be able to deal well with it if something negative happens at work, but your partner says something to you, you can shrug it off.
Is pretty much everything linked back to early childhood?
Yeah, seems like that.
In a way, it does, only because those early experiences happen before the brain develops the ability to make sense of them. So they kind of live deep inside of us. So they live in what's called core belief. They live in, some people call it the body, whatever you want to call it, the subconscious. And the subconscious is a reality, and it is what drives most of our behaviors, which is why, they always say that take a break, like think before you act, because that thinking allows your conscious brain to catch up. Otherwise, we're just acting on those very visceral things that we have no control over. Sometimes something happens, you just tear up. Sometimes something happens, you don't have a lot of control over those emotions. They do come from a part of us that we don't control. And so it is important to bring a lot of compassionate awareness around that. And when I say early experiences, I don't only mean your attachment style and, the experiences you had in your home, although, they do play a large part. But then it's also so many of other things as well that, again, I've mentioned in the book, you may have read it, it's your own temperament. It is the circumstances, the challenges that you face. Maybe they may have been too much for you to handle at the time. I know for me it was. And whatever other things that happen, it's like almost like a life review. You do a life review of your past, and then you fit it into the attachment styles and see, okay, what does it really point toward? Why is my tendency toward that? And that brings a lot of, one, peace, and it doesn't make you feel so weird. And two, you can bring a lot of compassion around those behaviors so that it's much easier to let them go then.
Okay, so, did you want to ask something?
No, I always struggle with this, it feels like nothing's our fault and we can take credit for nothing as well. because it feels like everything was programmed in from when we were little babies. And even the choice to examine yourself and fix the problems that were born into you as babies feels like that itself was probably born into you as a baby.
Yeah.
So we can't take credit for anything.
Yeah, no, that's you're making a good point.
It kind of is liberating and also kind of depressing. You know, we could have a whole other podcast on free will, which is a very disturbing topic, but it's kind of liberating in a sense. Like we don't have a choice and we're on this journey. And it's nice when you start making the right choices about examining yourself. But in the end, we shouldn't hate people for being the way they are. And we shouldn't hate ourselves for being the way we are, because really we have very, very little choice, if any.
Okay, so what happened to us, Andy, I 100% say it wasn't, especially at that time. And I think a lot of what happens to us is not in our control. We try to, we sometimes extend our agency, our sense of control a bit. We think it is more than it is. And I think bringing that back into perspective and saying that all of this happened to me, whether from other people, whether from life itself, is not in our control, which allows us to not take so much responsibility for everything that happened to us. But at the same time, I think as conscious creatures, we do have a natural desire to grow. I mean, that is built into us as human beings, the growth desire. We do have that desire to grow. And I think with a consciousness and an ability to think, we would want to think about our lives. Who do I want to be? I mean, it's that pre-programmed into us. These are questions that we ask ourselves. Nobody really forces us to ask them. But who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And these are important questions that then frees us to reflect on the way forward rather than be trapped in the past. Once we understand that these behaviors happen for a reason and we can distance ourselves from them, then we are kind of free to choose how we want to respond. We can design our lives in a way that we think it will get us closer to how we would want to be remembered, want to, at the end of our life say, this is what I lived. But also at the same time not be trapped by those behaviors. So bring more of an awareness around them, be able to be with what is instead of just rushing to action. I think what we do a lot in our societies is rush to action. Okay, I need to fix this. I need to just take action instantly. But if we can just step back a little bit and think, why is it like this? Bring a lot of compassionate awareness. Compassion is not weak in any sense. Compassion allows us to be courageous. Compassion allows us to think how we want to be, especially in relationships. It is very important because, human relationships, everybody's bringing their baggage with them when they enter a relationship. And so if we can have compassion for what we're feeling, that naturally extends into compassion and empathy for the other person. And then allows us to give a little, allows us to experience what we're feeling. And then by that time, like I said, the conscious brain does catch up. And then you can say, okay, this is how I want to be. And you're able to do that.
Can you imagine if the world was just full of Homaira's? Can you imagine? The world would be so harmonious.
We would just be all dancing, like holding hands.
Charlene, this is Homaira when she's giving advice. In real life, that's not me.
Well, you say that. I enjoyed there was an example in your book of when you kind of blew a gasket at your children in this one scene. It was during COVID, I believe. And I found it so relatable, and just even the thought process that got you there, because you were really trying to just go above and beyond for them. And then you felt that the appreciation you were receiving in return did not match what you were putting out there. And I found that so relatable, because that actually is a real curse with my perfectionism, is I'll put in so much effort, and then if I don't feel that the response feels like it matches in some way, and it's not even necessarily praise, because I find that I actually have a hard time even accepting praise. You know what I mean? It's like this sick cycle, but you still want it to somehow match, and then you start to examine how it doesn't match, and then you get upset. And I just found that such a relatable scene. It was, I loved your personal examples.
Thank you. But Sharleen, what you're really looking for is not praise. You're looking to be seen. That's what you're looking for.
Yep.
That's going back to a very early episode. One of our first Hot Topic episodes of this podcast, we talked about Enneagram types. And there are 9 Enneagram types, and what you're seeking is, what your goal is. And mine was to be understood. Type 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly, just something you touched on briefly, I'm totally going off. Like I had all these questions, but I was hoping it would flow like a conversation, and as it is. So
I told you this would happen.
Yeah, Andy did say that. I was like, I don't know if I have enough questions. And Andy was like, I think it's going to be okay. So our Enneagram types, 4 and 5, were deemed to be past oriented. And Andy and I tend to be very past oriented. We tend to make decisions based on a fear of regret, and we tend to be really nostalgic a lot of the time and sort of reflect on the past. And we have a hard time envisioning even 5 years into the future. You know, it's hard to, you talk a lot in the book about like, what is it you want? What do you want? You know what I mean? And it's a scary, I'm envious of the people who can so quickly be like, this is what I want. This is what I want my life to look like in 5-10 years. Do you think that there's a connection there, or like when you talk about those early experiences and wanting to, you know, reflect and grow and distance yourself from those experiences so that you can thrive and flourish and all the things. Do you think that the tendency towards perfectionism and towards trying to control everything is to live somewhat in the past?
So, Sharleen, we're not focused on the past. We're not deliberately focused on the past, but we're living the past in our present lives. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is because, and this is especially true in anxious attachment, because we don't learn the ability to be with our emotions. Our emotions overwhelm us. And so perfecting things, having a sense of control, all of this, that helps us manage our emotions. A lot of it is really about emotional management, about learning to be okay with not being okay. Any little risk, it's really the emotional upsurge that's really hard for us to take. And if we can be okay with that, and if we can then, I mean, I've struggled with it a lot in my life, just because every time I step out to take risks, in my head, I know it's not a big deal. I know that I know my stuff. So how do you deal with those emotions? How do you ride the wave of the emotions? How do you redirect the emotions into something positive and exciting, instead of trying to just calm them all the time? Because sometimes that's not possible, and sometimes it's not even advisable.
So Sharleen, we have admittedly gone through a lot of brands of sheets. There's always a problem.
Yeah.
They rip. They make me sweat.
Yeah.
They're not soft enough. They're too heavy. They're too slick. They're too smooth.
Yeah. Or sometimes they stain really easily. That has been a big issue for us. And the ripping, you know, you kind of glossed over that, but that actually has been the reason why we've replaced most of the sheets in the past, is because over time they start to pill, they start to get weak in spots where there's a lot of friction. And then what do you know, one of these nights, it's always you, you kick at some point in the night and it just hits the sheet in a weird way. And then you've got a huge tear.
And Cozy Earth has already lasted longer than any other set of sheets we've or I have ever had.
And based on that durability alone, you would not guess that they're also the softest sheets we've ever owned.
No, and I'll tell you something. We travel a lot. And I will say this. The first thing I notice when we are not at home is how I don't love the sheets.
We never like the sheets.
No.
I have legitimately considered packing bed sheets because they are so vastly superior to anything we get in a hotel or an Airbnb.
I can attest to that because I had to stop you. I had to draw the line. And on top of all these fantastic attributes, these sheets are made from highly sustainable viscose from bamboo.
Yes. Honestly, bamboo, it blows my mind. I have days where I'm like, that grows from the ground.
And without bamboo, no panda bears.
Most importantly. And we cannot talk about Cozy Earth without talking about Oprah. Because when Oprah loves something, you got to pay attention to it. You do. When you're Oprah, do you know how much free stuff she must be sent every single day?
Everything we've ever seen in the world, she's been sent for free. Don't listen to Dear Shandy, listen to Oprah.
Yeah. Cozy Earth bed sheets have been on her favorite things list for 5 years. 5 whopping years.
And Oprah can afford $1 million sheets.
Yes, she can.
This is the luxury she chooses.
And let me tell you, this is a lot cheaper than $1 million.
Yeah.
Shockingly.
Yeah.
That may be news to you.
You can now get Cozy Earth sheets for less than $1 million.
So right now, our listeners, the Shandys, can save a whopping 35% on Cozy Earth, but hurry, this New Year's offer ends soon.
Go to cozyearth.com/Shandy and enter promo code Shandy at checkout to save 35%.
cozyearth.com/Shandy. Okay, so now the questions are going to start being interwoven with our listeners. So we call them our Shandies. Our Shandies
Yes.
submitted a lot of questions. You know, sometimes we'll bring on a hot topic guest and they'll be like, oh, that's exciting. I don't have any questions, but looking forward to listening. Well, let me tell you, when I said we were going to be talking about perfectionism, people had questions. So one of these questions came from a Shandy who said she could already see in her daughters who were age 6 and 7, this trait of perfectionism. And she admitted that she is a perfectionist herself. So her question was, is perfectionism a learned trait or hereditary, nature versus nurture? I know that you said that the early experiences, you know, can tilt you in that direction based on your confidence, and self-worth. But is there any aspect of this that is hereditary?
Yes, a little bit for sure, because those of us who are so neurotic, you know, one of the personality traits of neuroticism, we do tend to be more perfectionist because it helps everything be under our control. And so we don't need to stress out about things so much. But I think a lot of it can be helped with nurture. I mean, nurture plays a huge role, but even if it is nature, through parenting, we can parenting one and intimate relationships the other one. These are two huge things that can help us with all of these extreme tendencies. I mean, you know, if the mom is herself a perfectionist, then it'll definitely come into the children, not only because children just do what they see their parents do, but also because it is likely that in everything that she asks them to do, the way she would want them to wash their hands or brush their teeth or pack their bag or whatever it is, there'll be little gentle, subtle ways of either rewarding perfection or reminding them to be a certain way. And children absorb all of that. I mean, especially kids, they just want mom to be happy, right? Parents to be happy. And so they're going to just naturally try to do all of that.
Do you have any advice for parents who maybe identify as perfectionists but don't want to pass that on? Like, what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is obviously the self-awareness, which she already has. So, I mean, you know, that's one awesome step already taken. And then I think identify her own areas of growth. So how does she let go of the perfectionism? So how does she include in her life little moments of not being so perfect and deal with it? And then the same with her kids. I mean, you know, when things are not that perfect, help them take themselves a little less seriously. You know, if things are not that perfect, or, you know, the bed's not made 100%. Oh, honey, that's fine. Like, what can we do with the time we saved in not
making the bed?
Making the bed may not even be the best example, but something else or the other. Like, what do you gain by not being such a perfectionist? I think that's a really important thing for the mom herself to think, okay, if I'm not being a perfectionist in this area, what am I gaining by it? And I think a huge gain is I'm not, you know, setting myself kids up to be a perfectionist and suffer it all her life. So focus on the gain, and that can really help.
The problem with that is I think a lot of people see perfectionists as these people who are so successful, you know, the top of their field. But I see perfectionists actually as living in a gear below their potential because they are comfortable that they can be perfect at that gear. But once they step up, they're no longer perfect. So the perfectionism to me actually does make a person who, you know, sort of from the outside looks maybe perfect in their own lifestyle, but could be so much better. And I feel that in my life, like every time, like I've taken some risks, I've gotten much better at this, but I mean, I'm doing a podcast, so I guess that's a risk. You can't really be perfect on a podcast. I've already noticed things that were not perfect on this podcast alone that I'd like to change, but I can't now. But I will say that, you know, I've taken more risks, but I found that I am most comfortable when I'm like, oh, I can do this perfectly. And I'm not going to try any harder. And I know I could try harder. And I know I could probably do better and fail and then do better and then fail and then maybe get perfect at a higher level. But I don't want to go there. And I think that to me is the worst part of perfectionism, is that you don't achieve your potential because you don't want to get to the perfect level up there. You want to stay at the perfect level where you know you can be perfect.
Exactly. You bring up such an amazing point, because you see, when you're trying to be perfect, and perfect is not a state, right? It's a mirage. It will always keep you, even when you get there, you'll be like, oh, I could have done more.
Yeah,
That
totally.
perfect-
Of course. Yeah.
It's not like you get there and you're like, I was perfect.
I've arrived. Time to die.
Exactly. And even if you feel I've arrived, it's going to just last for 2 minutes, and then
Yeah.
your mind will start going, okay, but that wasn't good enough.
Yep.
So when we don't really know ourselves, or when we reject parts of ourselves, when we're not happy with the way we are, and that again goes back to all that earlier good stuff, but we have this ideal that is not really based on who we are. It's this perfect ideal that is influenced by society and caregivers and whoever. And so that journey between not knowing who you are and this ideal that is full of anxiety, that's full of social comparison, that's full of always stressed out and doubting yourself and all of that. And those two circles, if you want to call it, never really align much.
Mm-hmm.
This is Carl Rogers and all about self-actualization. They just stay apart and you stay stuck in this gap, which has, you can throw in anxiety, depression,
Sure.
social comparison, shame, whatever. But when we really embrace who we are, which is where self-compassion comes in with, our faults, failings, everything is okay, then you can create an ideal self that is not externally motivated, but is based on who you are. So like you said, Andy, you can really say, this is what I really, really want. So not happy with that middle level, but this is what I really want, because now you're not worried about, oh, if I fail, what will others say? Or if I fail, how will I deal with it? So you can raise the bar at your full potential, whatever that potential is. And then that journey is far more joyful because you're not comparing to anybody else. You're running your own race. And those two circles come together. And that is what an actualized life is. They just keep all your life, you're just closing the gap more and more and more. And every moment you're feeling fulfilled, you're feeling happy. I mean, it's not a bed of roses all the time, but even that effort that you put in is not about proving yourself. It's just about just wanting that, knowing that this is my potential and this is how I can reach it.
Okay, so something you just said begs the question. In your research, have you seen a link between perfectionism and competition, like a competitive nature and or envy? Because you talked about, being in your own race, so you're not racing against anyone else.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you've seen that there's a link. I say this, by the way, I'm a perfectionist who I don't consider myself a competitive person.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
Okay.
For what it's worth.
So again, you spoke about, is it dependent on something or the other? So this is also Jennifer Crocker's research. So I want to give her credit for this. She says that it could be dependent on approval. It could be dependent on competition. It could be, she identifies all these different areas. So maybe yours is more dependent on approval and not so much on competition.
It is.
But-
it is.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
But as far as envy goes, I think envy is not necessarily a bad thing. Envy just reminds us of what we really value. So if you envy somebody for the path that they've chosen in their life or what they're doing with their lives, and if you feel envy, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that, yes, this speaks to me in some way. This speaks to my values, my aspirations, my something or the other. Jealousy, on the other hand, is different because that kind of is like, it's like a zero-sum game. Oh, they have it, but I wanted it, and now they have it, so I can't have it, kind of thing.
So one Shandy said that while they recognize that their perfectionism negatively impacts their life, they also felt it provided them with motivation, passion, goal making. And I myself feel like my perfectionism does reap benefits in some ways in my life. Like, I never mind how many hours of sleep I lost or, how much I sacrificed to get it. In the end, I am, in retrospect, proud of what I produced because I didn't produce something that wasn't quote unquote perfect. Yeah. So the question is, several Shandys actually asked variations on this theme. Is it possible to balance maintaining the ways in which perfectionism betters one life while discarding what is not necessary or is even harmful? Or is it more or less necessary to just throw out the baby with the bathwater and let it all go?
And no, don't do that. And I think this would come as a relief to them. You see, the thing is, with all these unhelpful behaviors, you have to know when they're serving you and when they're not serving you, right? I mean, I see so many young women who come to me and they're perfectionists, they're ambitious, they're perfectionists, they're putting in a lot of time and they're being very well rewarded for it at work as well. And so it's a good thing. I mean, why would I ask them to not do it? Unless, I mean, it's stopping them from doing other things that they really love to do. And they're saying, okay, it's restricting my life. A lot of people who really start struggling with it is when they start having a family, when they start having kids, they realize all these behaviors, because they are so hooked onto them, they cannot. So now they have to be the perfect employee, but then they also have to be the perfect mom, and they also have to be the perfect partner. And then, how many things can you do perfectly? So it is about, you can always choose that this is where I decide to be perfect, because it also brings me joy. Maybe it's not even perfection, it's excellence, what you really love, Sharleen, sorry.
You could call her Shandy.
That happens a lot, believe it or not.
Acceptable.
People call me Shandy and they call him Adam.
Yeah.
And so what you really love is excellence, right? Maybe that is your strength. It is a strength. It is actually a character strength, the love for excellence. And so you should be proud of that. You should use that as a strength. But perfectionism is when you have to have that excellence in every area of your life. It is impacting the quality of your life, but you just can't let go of it because it just gets emotionally very stressful for you to let go of it.
You just answered one of my other questions, which also came up a lot, which was, what's the difference between perfectionism and just high standards?
And I think high standards are good. And in relationships as well, I know this is a relationship podcast, and what's his name again? There's this research professor, Eli Finkel. He's written this wonderful book. It's called The All or Nothing Marriage. And he talks about it's great to have great expectations of your marriage. In fact, these days, we're going through this collective phase in our, let's say, collective journey as human beings, where we want to self-actualize, right? Most of us want to live our lives to their full potential, and that includes the relationship we have with our partners, whatever relationship we get into. And so to have high expectations, whether it is of ourselves, of our partners, relationship, all of that is a great thing. But we have to know, are we equipped for it? Like if it's in a relationship, do we have the communication skills that we can express this? Have we built the resources of forgiveness and of appreciation of the other and of all those things so that we can work toward what we want? It's the same with ourselves. I mean, it's good to have high expectations of ourselves. Why would we want to get to the end of our lives and say, hey, I didn't even live my potential, right? But are we doing it in a way that brings us joy, that feels meaningful, that is actually honoring all the other aspects of our lives that are important to us and meaningful to us? So that becomes the question at the end of the day. And so sometimes it is important to not take ourselves so seriously, to find, make, I wouldn't like to say compromises, but do it in a way that is taking everything along for the ride. What perfectionism, what it does is it wants to have it perfect, and it wants to have it now because you just want it perfect now, right? So be able to value the growth, to be able to value the journey and say, okay, this is where I am. I'm moving toward this ideal, whatever perfect it is, but it is one step at a time where I'm also enjoying it and finding it meaningful.
You have a knack for answering questions that I'm about to ask. This also came up a lot. Yeah, no, it is a great thing. And I just want to make sure that I verbalize the question because this one also came up a lot. And I really identify with this because this podcast is the first time Andy and I have gone into it's funny to call it a business, but business. Working together, and we work together in our home in New York City. So it's not a big place. You know what I mean? It's it's very challenging, especially when one of you is I'm very demanding. And so how can one manage not asserting their perfectionistic ideals on their partner, but also B, not harboring resentment when their partner inevitably, is not able to live up to those ideals?
Wait, what are you saying?
I'm sure that this, probably takes years for people to unpack. Do you have any advice for the Shandies who ask this, and also myself?
So I think Andy would like the answer. I think it is learn to appreciate who they are as a person. Because what we do in perfectionist tendencies, we have our own ideal of how we want things to be, because it helps somehow make our lives more perfect. Like, so I have the perfect partner, so I have the perfect life kind of thing. But that takes away from the fact that the other person is a human being with their insane strengths and, whatever aspirations and desires and the rest of it. And so the more we can connect to them at a more human level, the more it stops having all these expectations, because now you can see a whole different side of them that you've been likely blind to or not appreciated as much. Appreciate them, express that appreciation to them, because then whatever you want of them, we are reciprocal human creatures, right? So if you can appreciate who the other person is, you can talk about their dreams, their aspirations, have these kinds of conversations, you're pretty much building a container in which then you can throw in your demands. I mean, I like to talk about it like a metal container, right? Every time you throw in a coin, it'll clang really loud and it'll be like, there she goes again. And the more you can line that container with soft things like, cotton wool, all of that, that is the appreciation that you give the other person. Genuinely see the good in them, express that to them, so that when you make those demands of them, they will be more likely to listen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also I liked how you touched on appreciate what their strengths are, like what they do bring to the table. Because I think that's one of the ways, like, trust me, I fully... I think there's a lot of cotton wool. I give you a lot of cotton wool.
Yeah, there's wool. There's some wool. It's more of like when it hits the bottom, it's like, doom.
Yeah, there's a lot of praise. But I think sometimes my expectations, or like me asserting my perfectionism onto him, is almost asking him to be someone he's not. Like, I recognize that he brings to the table things I simply cannot.
Exactly. So, the thing is, at the end of the day, what you asking of him or wanting of him isn't right or wrong. The thing is, we get stuck on a certain thing, and then we become blind to the full picture, right? So when you can see the strengths, you can see all of that, now you have the fuller picture, and then the demands that you make or the asks that you make are not so, I just need that and I need it now, and why didn't you do it, and all of that, because now you're entering it from the appreciation of the whole person. And for sure, make your demands if they're important to you, if they're reasonable, if you're not asking him for something that he just cannot provide. But if they're reasonable and they're important to you, for sure, ask them in a way that is, respectful. And then also remember to always remind the other person when they forget, because we are human beings, we can forget. Also remember to appreciate it when they remember, because then they'll be likely to do it more. You're basically building a new habit in them. Seeing the good is not about, but he also does this, so let me drop this demand. Because then, yes, you will feel resentful down the line somewhere or the other, right? It's not spiritual bypassing, but at the same time, expand it so that you're not so hung up on a certain thing, and then ask for it, for sure, ask for it, and even show him why it's important to you. Partnerships, I mean, when you're showing him how you appreciate him, you're showing him why it's important to you, he would most likely want to make your life better as well.
You know what I'm hearing is that, the whole thing, everything in moderation, usually people use that in terms of like food and diet, but I feel like it applies to this very much as well. It's like everything in moderation. You can be a perfectionist in moderation, like pick your battles. Same with you. Like I can demand things of you in moderate, like the things that matter the most to me. It's just people have a hard time knowing where the line is. I
will say though that the pushing you've given me, I'll call it pushing for lack of a better word.
Okay.
I love to hate it, but I already hate to love it, I think. But it's gotten me a little bit out of my comfort zone, in my perfectionist comfort zone. Like I know, like what I was discussing earlier, I know that I can, let's take this podcast for example. I know I can do this podcast at this level very perfectly. Yeah. But to take it to this level, I'm a little scared. I don't want to do that. But what Sharleen has done is she's kind of pushed me aggressively to get to that level. And I will say that no one else does that in my life, probably good. That would be very stressful if everyone in all facets of my life were pushing me that hard. But it has been a lesson for the perfectionists, for my perfectionist self, because she's obviously loves me a lot. And I know that, there's no doubt. So someone who truly loves me is trying to make me better forcibly. And it doesn't feel good. It hurts. It's frustrating. It kind of makes me angry at times. Yeah. But at the same time, it's possibly one of the only things that's allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to rise above where I know I can be perfect. Yes. So it has been helpful. And that kind of circuitously brings me to another point, which is shame. And I do feel that shame is what drives my inability to push myself past my sort of stasis of perfectionism. And my question to you, Homaira, is what do you find to be in most people the driver of perfectionism? Is it something from within, where you're just a person who's like, I need to be the best. I love myself and I want to be the best I can be? Or is it mostly driven by, shame is kind of a broad term, but is it mostly driven by people? Like you want to impress people, or you want people to think of you a certain way and you don't want to be ashamed of your life in the eyes of other people?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And it is the latter.
By the way, we talk about shame at least once an episode on Dear Shandy.
Like once an hour.
Yeah, shame comes up a lot here.
But that's a great thing that you talk about it. I mean, shame, that is the best way to manage shame, is by talking about it. Shame loves secrecy. So it's wonderful that you can talk about it.
I like that.
Oh, I like that too. That's a good line. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So, it is mostly... almost always, it is externally driven. It is, what would others think? I have to rise. See, the thing with shame is what you're trying to hide is some perceived lack, some perceived inadequacy that came from whatever early experiences you had. And you know what? Most of us have it. Like, it's not like, oh, somehow your caregivers or life was extremely terrible to you. That is the way it is. I mean, life isn't perfect. Why are we trying to be perfect? It's like, it's just the mixed bunch that was thrown at you. And as a result of that, we develop some perceived notion that we're inadequate or worthless or broken in some way. Most of us carry that to varying degrees. And so to hide that, because it's a very painful feeling, nobody wants to feel that. And we are social creatures. We live amongst other people. We put on these masks, this garb, that we are somehow acceptable. We need to be acceptable. It's a human need, because we are tribal, that we have to be acceptable. And so we have all of these perfectionist things, because we are really trying to hide that lack or that inadequacy. Perfection is very outcome oriented versus that other thing that you spoke about. Oh, I want to have the best life. Why not? That is very process oriented. And so this is where it gets really difficult, because when it's outcome oriented, you're going to avoid risks. You're going to do all of that because you have to be perfect. I mean, if you're not, then what would others think? And, how will you deal with all of that? But if you just want to grow into and that is where it takes me back to what you said, Sharleen, earlier, that you guys don't think, both of you find it hard to plan 5 years ahead. I think that would be an amazing thing for the podcast. Think of where do we want to take this podcast 5 years from now or 10 years from now? What do we want to grow it into? And get excited by all of that, because then it becomes process oriented. You have this vision, this very internally motivated thing of what you can see this podcast as becoming. And then that motivation is something that is not so much coming at you and you're driving yourself toward it, but it's coming from within you.
I mean, I feel that the best people, the most quality human lives are created from that, not from the need to appease other people.
Approve.
That may create the tallest buildings or the biggest bank accounts, but I don't think it creates the people we remember in history. Like, that was a great life.
Oh, totally.
And it's so beautiful you say that, Andy, because it reminds me of a quote by Joseph Campbell. And he said, when it's externally motivated, he said, you do all of this, you get there, Herculean efforts, all of that. And you get to the top and you realize you were climbing someone else's wall.
You twisted yours
I
a few more
twisted mine. You
times. I did a slight twist. It didn't need extra twisting.
No, we were dead already.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, that's good.
That actually, I have a list of quotes from your book. One you said that reminded me of that was, we become an object of external demands rather than the subject of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings me to a sort of devil's advocate kind of question. This was, no one actually asked this. This is one of my questions, but I have a feeling people might relate. So I'm going to ask it anyway. While I logically recognize that my perfectionism holds me back in many ways, and like I said, I can feel disdainful or like frustrated or defeated if I don't feel like I get the matching recognition, or I don't feel fully seen, as you said. I have to admit, I do feel a weird sense of pride over my perfectionism, like my attention to detail, my work ethic, my willingness to I don't want to say like to give up, hours of my life on something that doesn't matter, because that's not something I like about myself, but I have to admit it, like the result is something I'm proud of. And I do feel a sort of like frustration when it feels like other people get ahead with ideas that feel half-baked or execution that in my eyes seems sloppy. It's like, that doesn't add up. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
What would you, I really hope people relate to this, because this question does not sound very flattering as I say it out loud.
No, you're going to be good. You're going to be okay.
So my question is, what would you tell someone like me where logically I'm like, this isn't my friend, but I almost hold on to it as a part of my identity. It's not necessarily something I want to let go of much.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So awesome. That's a great question. And I think all the Shandys will relate and feel much closer to you as a result.
I agree.
We live in this world that really rewards perfectionism, right? So every time you're a perfectionist, people honestly do wear it as a badge of honor. You ask people, how are you doing? Oh, so busy, busyness, perfectionism, all of these things. Right?
Everybody's so busy.
I'm too busy to tell you how things are going right now.
I can't even talk.
Right? And if you say, oh, I'm having a good time, that just feels like I have no life, right?
That's so true.
So sad.
So, when we have that fragile confidence, we are dependent on external feedback. We are dependent on external praise. We are dependent on external approval, and we pick it up wherever we get it, right? So all these little signs make you feel good about yourself. And this has been happening, like I said earlier, for decades. You just hooked onto that. Now this has become your own inner voice. Now you reward yourself for it.
Okay, sorry, I'm taking a moment because that needs a second. Okay, continue, sorry.
Right? So because of that, you're also disconnected from the bigger picture. Perfectionism just keeps us trapped in all of those little tick box, and disconnected from the bigger picture. So disconnected from what I really want, what can potentially grow here. And so when you see other people getting ahead with, like you said, a little bit of sloppy work and all of that, maybe they are more connected to their final vision, and this is just their path. So you are comparing your final product with their path to whatever they're trying to get to.
You're very good at this.
She wrote a book.
She wrote a book. Okay. Loved that answer. You also managed, I wasn't sure, honestly. I felt like some of the questions where I was like, gosh, like she coaches people for years. It's like, how can you answer some of these questions in just a couple of minutes? But you really do a great job of sort of distilling it down to using a lot of analogies also.
Yes.
We like
analogies.
Climbing someone else's mountain. Okay, so another common question was around the idea of analysis paralysis. And I love how you quoted the famous FOMO acronym, but then you also mentioned that the person actually who came up with FOMO, who coined FOMO, also came up with FOBO, which I have to admit resonated with me even more. And that is fear of a better option. Andy's laughing because he's seen me spend hours online comparing, as Shandy put this better than I can. Whether it's comparison shopping toasters or pet insurance options, I feel like I have to exhaust and compare all options, and then I get overwhelmed and can't ever decide. So,
yeah, just to give you an example, I've been in a CVS with Sharleen, and we're buying something like body wash or hand soap, and she'll spend a full minute comparing which bottle has a straighter label or has a slightly higher fill level.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I don't like it when the seam of the bottle is on the front of the bottle with like the labels on top of it.
Ooh,
I think
yeah.
the seam should be at the back. This is, I have a problem.
important
I can
things.
admit I have a problem. So what would you tell people who suffer with this analysis paralysis?
Okay, so first I have to say you may know of Barry Schwartz's research on maximizers and satisficers. So you're definitely a maximizer. And Andy, I don't know about you. You may be a satisficer. You've looked around, you've seen two, one seems good enough, and you walk away with that. So again, it boils down to the same thing. Know what is really important to you. If that's, that shower gel is so important to you and you really look at it every day and you get excited by the fact that it's pink and it's got a straight label, then fine. But if you're doing that for everything in your life, then it's going to be very difficult. But as far as analysis paralysis goes, I mean, that is just a fear of failure at the end of the day, right? It is fear of a better option. It is fear of failure. It is just driven by fear that what if I, don't come out on top, or what if I come out at the bottom? It's just that. And so you keep going round and round, but you're not really getting anywhere. So if you need an answer for that, the thing is, and this is a great research by Daniel Kahneman, you write down the pros, cons of both options. You write down the pros of this option, cons of it, pros, cons. You've done all the analysis, because, it's also very hard to say, oh, just don't analyze, just go with your gut or something. It doesn't work that way. So you'd write down that, especially for us perfectionists. We need to know, we're not like we've done all the work. And then after that, just sit back and then disconnect from all of that. You've got it all down on paper. Then you have to just sit back and say, okay, what does my gut tell me? It's difficult as well. For some people, they're so disconnected from their gut, but it's a muscle. You practice it. You say, okay, what would I regret not doing 10 years from now, or which is a decision that the 10-year future self of me would ask me to take. There are different ways you can build that muscle, but analysis paralysis, definitely write down everything, but then don't make that decision with your head, because your head will always keep coming up with different options. It won't stop. All it's trying to do is protect you. You say one thing, it's like that Rolodex. It'll just keep coming back with something else and something else. So once you've done that, you've got it all down, just sit back and say, now my head's not deciding. Now something else in me is deciding.
Ooh, okay. So sorry, I can't let you go yet. I have to ask a question based on that, because you did talk in the book about how you can sort of like rewire your brain. Yes. And I'm wondering, with this specific example, let's say we're talking about the body wash at the CVS. Would it over time change me in a positive way to not compare the 6 different bottles of identical body wash and just take the first one and move on with my life? No, especially knowing that in 10 years, this decision I will not care about this decision.
10 seconds.
So is that like a small exercise that you would suggest to people or to me? Okay.
Yes. And so one of the exercises would be exactly like Andy said. Would this matter 1 day from now? Would this matter 3 days from now? Would this matter 10 days from now? Get to the time frame that makes you feel comfortable. And then just move on with that.
Andy's really enjoying this conversation.
No, this is fun. And we're going to put this in practice this weekend. We're going to a CVS. We're going to buy a lot of stuff really fast.
Sharleen, what would really help is just allow yourself to be imperfect and deal with the emotion that results from it, because it will be emotionally very painful. You would just be itching to go there and get that other bottle, or go fix it in some way, or pour it into the old bottle that's over, but at least it was perfect, or do whatever. But the thing is, you have to ride that wave. You have to have coping mechanisms for that moment where you keep telling yourself, it's okay, we're going to get through this. Wouldn't matter. Have some mantras that help you. Tell Andy to distract you with some humor, whatever it is. But, you're both in it together. That's why relationships, healthy relationships like yours, is so beneficial to heal us. Relationships, intimate relationships can really heal. Healthy intimate relationships heal whatever we carry from our early years. So have all of that, because you have to learn to be with the discomfort. That's the most important thing.
Oh yeah, that hit me. Okay.
I didn't expect CVS to bring you to tears in this podcast.
Yeah, it's fun. No, there were other things that she said earlier on where I was like, okay, no, I feel myself welling up a bit, but that's not it. And then this one when she's like, deal with the emotion of why that bothers you. Okay. So Homaira, we're going to let you go shortly. I have 2 remaining questions, and I cannot choose just one. I know that's shocking. So I'm going to force you to answer this first one quickly, which is just cruel. You dedicate a good portion of your book to the quest to find our purpose. Yeah. How does finding one's purpose tie into shedding our perfectionism?
Yeah. So I'll be quick with this.
It's horrible for me to ask her that.
So finding our purpose really connects us to our full potential. So you see, each one of us has this potential. Something amazing, something brilliant, something beautiful. You can bring soft language around it. You can bring whatever, head-centric language around it, but we all come into this world with some potential. And actualizing that potential is the journey of life. But when we don't value that potential, when we don't own it, when we're not aware of it, when we reject it, again, for all those reasons that we spoke about, then we are hooked onto all of these other things. So when you find that potential and you're living on purpose toward that, helping yourself actualize that, all of this becomes very meaningless, right? It doesn't matter so much. It's so much easier to let go of them. Sometimes, yes, you do need to do a little bit of work, especially because when you get hooked onto those behaviors, you don't learn certain other skills that now you need to learn. So you need to learn how to be okay with the discomfort. You need to learn how to have that conversation. You need to learn how to allow people in your life. You need to learn how to discern between what needs perfection, what doesn't need perfection. These are some skills that we do need, but it's much easier to work on them because you're working towards something much bigger than that.
This reminds me a lot, and a lot of.
Oh my God, this reminds me of something too. If it's the same thing, then
cleaning
that's
our house.
No.
Okay.
Okay, go.
Well, Sharleen accuses me of being a hoarder, which is completely untrue. If I'm a hoarder, I'm the lightest, at the 0.5 hoarder. But I keep a lot of things. Often I feel like it's for sentimental value, or maybe I'm going to use this one day, and that day comes, I'm going to be like, I wish I had that thing. But, we went through a big cleaning of all the closets and everything, and I was throwing away so much stuff. I was like, oh, maybe I'll need that. And you know what? Like the soap, 10 seconds later, the next day, there was not 1 second of that day after I'm telling you, it was 200 pounds of stuff. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. The next day, for not one split second, did I think about the loss of any of those things. And I think in life, if we can see ourselves as the kind of cleaning of a closet, I know that's an overused metaphor, but I really feel like if you could just look at things and be like, have I used that recently? Or has that given me any value recently? And do I feel that I'm going to have any value from that in the future? And if not, just throw it out and don't think about it. Exactly. And I feel like, it's easier said than done. But I think if you can think about these issues like perfectionism or shame or how you want other people to see all this stuff that's really handicapping you, if you can just see it as just throwing away stuff that you haven't used in a long time, or that's just causing issues and clutter and you won't use in the future, just do it. Get rid of it.
Exactly.
It's
and
funny
do it with love, because it did come to protect you in some way, right? It was there, it served you at a time, but now it's no longer doing its job. So get rid of it, right?
Yeah. Oh, I did it with love. Every single thing I shed a tear. All the garbage.
That Marie Kondo or what's the name?
Yeah, Marie Kondo, yeah. If it doesn't spark joy, So actually my example, I was for a second there, I was like, oh my God, if we're thinking of the same example, that's insane. But we are a relationship podcast. And so a lot of times we are giving relationship advice. And it's kind of similar in the idea when we're like, you're wasting your time with this person, like you're spending 3-4 nights a week or your Saturday nights, like these, these precious hours of your time with someone who's married or who is not committing to you or who's, blah, 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 who's giving you mixed signals. Those are hours you could be out with your friends, going on a first date with someone who could change the rest of your life, living your life, and who knows where those connections and those hours could take you. And that's what sort of stands out to me about what you said, Homaira, is the idea that by letting go of certain things, you now have a capacity for something new.
No, yours was better than mine. Yours is better. You won.
Oh, no, I liked yours a lot, though.
No, I liked yours more.
Okay.
But you know what? What both have is the safety, right? You're hanging on to that, whatever relationship, dysfunctional, or you're hanging on to your clothes or whatever thing, or whatever, because they make you feel safe, right? So it is the willingness to now step into explore, like, curiosity, what else is possible if I'm not like so trapped into this and so hooked by that because it's just not serving me.
So to the people who have sought out this conversation, because maybe they saw perfectionism in the title, they were curious. What parting words would you have for people who tuned into this episode? What would you like their overriding takeaway to be?
Oh, that is such a great question. I mean, I would be inspired by something Andy said earlier, and it's just take yourself a little less seriously. I mean, honestly, this is one chance we get at this life, and it's so magical and it's so beautiful, and there is so many opportunities and so much around us and so much magic in the people around us, and there is so much to be discovered and uncovered. And when we just stay trapped in all of this and taking ourselves seriously and taking life and everything else so seriously, we miss the magic. And I think we would all regret it at some point and say, I wish I'd lived a little more. I wish I'd laughed a little more. I wish I'd not gotten so hung up about small things. And so just take life take yourself a little less seriously. And as a consequence, you'll take everything else a little less seriously as well. And just recognize that voice in your head that keeps yapping away, because it will, and it keeps pushing you and tormenting you, and just create some distance from it and say, no, I want to embrace joy. I want to, not be so hung up on all of this.
Homaira Kabir, thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Also
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
For letting me reschedule on you because of my perfectionism. We really enjoyed having.
That was called diligence, not perfection.
True.
Thank you so much. We've just had a great time chatting.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Oh, well, she was delightful.
Yes.
I'm like exhausted now.
I know, it was intense. It was intensely delightful.
Yeah, whenever an episode really, we had a similar thing with our the platonic friendship episode. These are things that I struggle with, and so it's like kind of exhausting. Like the build up even to this episode, I was like, I have to read her book from beginning to end, and I need to have the right. I wanted to make sure I had questions that I felt represented the perfectionists of the world. And the Shandys definitely helped too. They were able to put into words some things that I wasn't able to, but I'm just kind of wiped. I'm wiped out, but I do feel lighter. And also, like, next time we go to CVS, I'm going to practice. You're going to hold me to this. I feel like
I don't see this happening.
No, I really want to try. That's the thing, is I don't know a single perfectionist, even though I did talk, there was one question that talked about the sixth sense of pride. Ultimately, if I could change this about myself, I would.
Oh, I know.
You're like, I don't want to be like this. I want to be the kind of person that can like clock out and not spend an extra hour editing this one minute detail on a thumbnail for this podcast that no one's going to notice.
Right.
I want that hour of my life.
Or caring about the one really negative comment amongst hundreds of positive ones.
Yes.
That is the advanced buying soap in CVS.
Yeah, there was one of the other quotes I grabbed from here, first of all, I loved the discussion of shame. I love that you brought it to shame because I was hoping it would come to shame because how could we not bring up shame? It
always comes to shame.
It does. And so a quote she has in the book is, not experiencing shame is worse than experiencing shame because it says something about our ability to feel remorse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which we have
or
you have expressed that in some way before. I also thought the 3 common reactions to shame were interesting. One was move away. So that's to withdraw, silence yourself, start avoiding people and or situations.
It's usually me.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were 3.
I'm a little of 1 and 3.
Okay.
I saw 3 too, yeah.
2 is move toward. This is me. Yeah. Please, appease, go out of your way to make sure others don't dislike you. And then 3 is move against. So blame or make sure people know it wasn't your fault. You're somewhere between 1 and 3.
I think we all have a little bit of 1, 2, and 3.
I agree.
I mean, shame is a very universal and complex experience.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah. It's interesting, when you think about human experience, just people, if you want to do the XY axis of like the human brain, like there's extreme not caring about what people think, like extreme, like right at the bottom of the X axis.
Yeah.
And then there's extreme, like loving and feeling like amazing about yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you really think about it, like, I know this is a little twisted, but you can make a case that that's kind of a psychopathic nature.
Which one?
Like where you feel like you're the greatest thing in the world and you don't care at all what other people think about you. There's some level of like, not psychopathic, sociopathic.
Yeah, but there's also
element.
an argument to be made that is all a coping mechanism. Like that's just a front because deep down you really are that insecure.
Right. It's all like, it's almost 2 sides of a coin, but it's like the differences are massive based on where the motivation orientation is.
Oh, it's so true. Actually, it's insane how this one kernel, like it's actually it's probably the same kernel, or at least a sister kernel of why you are that way. And then the effect is so different.
Yeah. Yeah. It just manifests itself. It's just a tiny turn of the screw.
Yeah.
And it manifests itself between you becoming like Ted Bundy and like someone who cures cancer.
Oh, even laughing is tiring now.
Oh, like, sorry. No more laughs. I will say that I've had the song Life is a Highway stuck in my head the whole time. I was like I kept humming it in my head. I was like, stop it. Because your podcast, the name Life is a Highway. I don't think in Oman they listen to Rascal Flatts. I don't think that's a big...
What?
Rascal Flatts. Do. You think so in Oman? That Rascal Flatts have it big in Oman? I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, why are you bringing this up?
No, I wonder if she's a fan of Rascal Flatts or has no idea that they exist. It's one of the two, I'm thinking.
Oh, I mean, that's a pretty iconic song. It's hard to imagine. Like, to me, that's international fame song.
Yeah, but how many people can name Rascal Flatts as the person?
If I'm
who
honest
sings it?
with you, when I saw Life is a Highway, I was like, Life is a highway. But I wasn't like, that song is by Rascal Flatts. I would not have gone there.
Yeah. Very few people know that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, getting to the important things here.
So I have to address the fact that this ring light has been flickering throughout this entire episode, and I have been exercising not trying to control it and just accepting it. This is me embarking on a new journey.
That's great. I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, because I mean, in other episodes, I'd be like, stop, hold, like, T.O., everyone, like, remember what you were about to say, and then I would have to go and adjust the ring light. And in this case, I was like, no one will be able to tell that the ring light flickered. It's okay.
Good for you. The amazing thing is I cannot tell at all that that's flickering. Two sides of a coin.
And that, when we talked about, like, I had a moment when it was flickering and she was talking and she and I were talking and you're closer to the ring light. I had a moment where I was like, why can't he just sense that the ring light is flickering and just reach over and fix it? And she talked about like recognizing each other's strengths. It's like, you just don't see that.
Well, I don't. And it makes my life so much better.
Oh, I'm jealous.
But you can learn to just stop. What you have is you're on the spectrum of getting to the person who's sitting talking to someone and there's like a deck of cards sitting on a table and it's slightly off a 90-degree angle from the edge of the table.
Yeah.
And they're like, how can this person sit here and let that happen? This is insane.
Yeah.
Like that's the end of the line. and you're there. So that's not a good spectrum.
I'm not proud of this.
No, and I have some of it too. I'm not just, I'm not shaming
when
you.
I'm in yoga class and someone's yoga mat is obviously like off kilter from the shape of the room and it's not like parallel to the side of the wall that they're next to, I'm like, how are they allowing this to happen? Even when I do Shavasana, I want to be equidistant, my head from like to the top of the mat, from my feet to the bottom of the mat. This is a problem. I recognize this is the start of my recovery.
I will say it does benefit me to some degree because in this apartment, everything is perfectly on angle. Mm-hmm. Nothing is crooked.
As much as it can be in a 130-year-old building anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the walls are crooked. There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah. But everything is level.
Yes,
it's
yes,
level.
yes.
Okay, I think we should wrap there. Oh, that filled my heart, even though I'm tired.
Yeah.
But I really
great.
loved that towards the end, that idea of like letting something go will give you the space to bring in something else.
Yeah.
To change your ways maybe, and maybe bring in things that will give you joy. Maybe
allow
your
the
purpose.
light. Allow the light in. Allow it in.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get in my yogi pose. I'm floating now. There I go. I'm going.
If anyone can't see, he's not on his chair
Hold
anymore.
on a second. Wait, I'll do it here. I started here. Here I go, right? Okay, I can't float anymore.
Okay. If you enjoyed what you heard today, you know what we will ask of you, and that is to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow us on Instagram, and
TikTok.
Leave us
Apple
and
Spotify.
Podcast ratings and reviews. Tell your friends, and generally do all the things that you would do to support a podcast you enjoy.
And is perfect.
And answers your questions for you anonymously to experts.
Yeah.
Yes. I hope this episode helps some people. I
too.
feel like I'm changed.
Me too.
Or at least I feel like I have a little more awareness now.
I'm a little more down the highway.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Dear Shandy. Bye-bye. Dear Shandy.